first, and this is something that's definitely near and dear to my heart. So we know, as we saw in 2012 election, there's a real and concerted effort to make it harder for someone to vote. We saw with our own eyes here in Ohio. We watched through television what was going on in other states across this country. And you would have thought that the GOP, because it is the GOP that is pushing, trying to take us backwards. Democrats are not trying to take us backwards, but you would have thought that they would have learned their lessons last year, but they did not. So they're still up to their dirty, rotten tricks department. From last year through recalibration of this spring, Republicans have no real interest in changing their policies or their appeal to more voters. What they want to do is try to pretend that they're not putting their message out properly instead of really analyzing their policies and to change their policies to fit the needs of Ohioans and other folks in this nation. This is being done systematically state by state. Virginia just recently passed a new voter ID bill. In North Carolina, a bill was introduced last week that would raise the taxes of parents whose children vote from their college address instead of their home address. This happens right now. This is happening in real time right now to penalize parents. So GOP, not only are they going after votes, they're going after folks' pocketbooks, and there's just something un-American and unfair about that. A bill introduced last week in North Carolina that would raise the taxes of parents whose children vote from their college address instead of their home address. The ability of these students to vote from school was affirmed by the Supreme Court in the 1970s. Republicans can't stop it, so they're finding more ways to make it more painful, and they're doing it through the states. And although, when Ohio moves, the entire nation moves, and we saw that as people waited with bated breath for Ohio's returns to come in. Not just in 2012, but also in 2008. And I'll share a story with you that Senator Tom Sawyer shared with me, and he is from the Akron area, and he said he actually had classmates call him to tell him that they were going to come to Ohio because they wanted to help us out last year. Everybody wanted to be here because they knew that if Ohio came through for the president, that he would regain and would return to the White House. And that is a beautiful thing, Ohio. We did it. We did it. So, if Republicans can't get the White House at the moment, they'll do everything through the legislature, and they will do things through governor's mansions, and they are doing just that. So this is why, these kind of antics, in the state of Ohio, we have voter ID bills introduced. The voter ID bill did pass the Ohio House. Thank God it did not make it to the floor of the Ohio Senate, but they are threatening and working on ways to bring that bill back. Well, one of the reasons why I introduced the Voter Protection Act is because I don't believe that Democrats can sit idly by, even though we are in the minority in a serious way, especially in the Senate. But I don't believe that we can just sit back and let things happen to us. So one of the reasons why I introduced the Voter Protection Act at the beginning of this year, because I wanted to affirm what Democrats stand for when it comes to voting. And so this legislation would ensure that voters have the opportunity to have their voices heard by guaranteeing adequate early voting hours, prevent voters from needlessly being disenfranchised, and provide local boards of elections the opportunity to craft within certain constraints election systems that fit the needs of voters. Now, we saw what happened last year, not only through the General Assembly, but what our current Chief Elections Officer, who I call the Secretary of Suppression, was able to do through directives. Directives have the weight of law, especially for boards of elections, so it's very, very important that we recognize that. The things that he advocated for last year, decrease in early voting opportunity, unconditional uniformity across the state of Ohio. A long line in our county may be different from a long line in a smaller county. So just to say the word uniformity should not bring you joy, it should cause you pause. They deliberately tried to take away Sunday voting, and what the data shows now, and I was just in Ashland County this past weekend, and the director of the Board of Elections shared with me that members of that county enjoyed Sunday voting. This is misnomer that only urban areas care about the last 3 days, but what we saw from the data is that if a Sunday is available, if that last weekend is available, Ohioans like the last 3 days. And that is a beautiful thing, because when you are the chief elections officer, it should not matter about red or blue. It should matter about the vote and equalizing the franchise and making sure everybody has the opportunity, but we suffered through that. So we had very long lines in some of our urban areas, and provisional voters were treated like second-class citizens. So I go a long way to try to change some of that. A lot of conversation among Democrats about redistricting. The lines that we have right now are rotten. I mean, just rotten. We could fight the fight and try to have mid-decade redistricting, which issue 2, we know issue 2 failed. It's a hard issue to explain to voters. It's a hard issue to get people excited about it. And I think everybody last year was very much focused on the president. But if we are unable to get mid-decade redistricting, we really need to concentrate our efforts on making sure that we get more Democrats in the Ohio House, more Democrats in the Ohio Senate, and we need to take back those constitutional offices in 2014 as we build to 2018 as we build to the next time that redistricting is going to take place. Now, we can take efforts and focus on redistricting, but to me that will dilute the much broader fight that we need to fight, and that is taking back the offices in the state of Ohio. But I will tell you that last year, right before we went on recess, we did pass a bipartisan redistricting measure. It is not perfect, but it is better than what we have right now. And when I say bipartisan, I mean that Democrats got in the room with Republicans and we laid on the table those things that we could agree on. Now, we know we have a whole host of things that we don't agree on, but we laid on the table. And yours truly was part of that. Senator Tom Sawyer was part of that, Senator Faber, and also Senator LaRose. And we were able to pass that redistricting resolution 32-1, which has never been done in the Ohio Senate. And only one senator voted against that, and the person who voted against it because he did not believe that the Constitution should be messed with in that way. So, at times it doesn't matter who has the pen. I mean, of course we want Democrats to have the pen, but both parties over the years have drawn lines that were unfair. But we have not seen anything on this level, and a lot of political scientists believe that the reason why these lines are so bad is because of technology. They can perfect the madness now. And so we have to make sure that when we get the pen back, because we will, that we draw lines that are in the best interest of voters and not elected officials. Elected officials should not choose their constituents. Constituents who choose their elected officials. So it's kind of hard to take politics out of politics, but I am a firm believer when it comes to drawing the lines. And we see the madness that has happened right now with how the Republicans drew the line. And Ohio and Pennsylvania, I believe, were rated as 2 states that had the worst lines in the entire country. The worst. So we got to come up with some equitable ways to redistrict. The budget, which the president talked about how the Republicans are turning on their own, and that is absolutely true. The governor's budget didn't do work in Ohio with many favors, but one part that did was the expansion of the Medicare under the Affordable Care Act. This week, the House Republicans stripped the expansion from the bill, and the party that really says they care about jobs, the Medicaid expansion not only provides health care for people who need it, but it also provides jobs, but that was not good enough for them. Anything that's anti our president, they don't care who they take down, as long as it's against President Obama, they don't want it. And this is, to me, a great example of how redistricting has come back to bite Republicans. But because they drew those lines that gave them so much comfort, their main concern is being primary. And if they can make it to the primary, they know that they can win elections. And because they fear the Tea Party is the main reason why they took Medicaid expansion out of the budget. So they want to forego $13 billion in federal money that would create almost 4,700 jobs in Cuyahoga County alone. I'm asking the people in this room to make sure that you call your state senators. It's still time to call the rest, but that bill is coming over to the Now, I'm happy to report that Democrats did introduce standalone bills in the House, and Senator Shirley Smith is going to introduce a standalone bill in the Senate to deal with Medicaid expansion so that we can take it alone, and that would be better for Democrats, because all Democrats support the Medicaid expansion. But if it's attached to that budget, I'm not so sure if Democrats would go as far as to vote for that budget, because there's so many bad things in the budget. So Democrats took a lead this week introducing a standalone bill for the Medicaid, and basically what we're saying to Republicans, you get the Republican votes that we need, we will give you the Democratic votes, and let's expand Medicaid in the state of Ohio for the working poor and for families and for businesses. So they took that out. Another area that I was asked to touch upon, well, before I go to the upcoming elections, the budget for the schools is woefully inadequate. And we know that the Republicans have changed what the governor first put on the table, and in some cases, for some school districts it got better, for some school districts they're flat, and for some school districts it's gotten worse. Under the governor's proposal, 60% of the school districts in the state were flat funded. Now what does that mean for you and I? What does that mean for our children? If, in fact, we want to keep our competitive edge as a state and as a nation, we have got to educate our children. And our children are not competing with children from Franklin County or Hamilton County or Richland County. They're competing with children from all over the world. And so we cannot say that we are a state on the move if we are not educating our children properly. And it should not matter what zip codes our children come from or who their parents are or are not. Every child is entitled to a high-quality education, and the state of Ohio has failed. The General Assembly has failed to answer the Roth. We still have an over-reliance on property taxes. Governor Strickland tried to create it. As soon as Governor Kasich got in, they reversed everything that Governor Strickland tried to do, and he tried to do it at a time where we were entering the Great Recession. So it was a hard push to try to say that the state was going to put more money in education at the same time that the bottom was falling out nationally. But what we see, the GOP, they say one thing, but follow the money to see where their priorities are. Their priorities are not there. We got to make sure that we have teachers in the classroom, that classroom size is not too big to make sure that every child learns, and that children have the technology and the supplies that they need so that they can be educated and so that they can compete. We talk about getting children to college, but my God, the prerequisite to getting them to college is getting them through high school. And in order to get them high school, we need pre-K funding. And I want to tell you, I am on the Children's Caucus, and we have a bipartisan Children's Caucus, and we're talking right now about how the Children's Caucus should weigh in on this budget. And one of the things that we are looking to make a recommendation is that the state of Ohio puts more money in pre-K education throughout the state, because there are studies that show, and if there's educators in this room, you understand that if we can get the child before they get to kindergarten, we increase the likelihood that they will get through school in fine fashion, and that they will be given the tools that they need to live out their greatest greatness. That is our responsibility as a state, but that is our responsibility as a community as well. So we are fighting very, very hard for that, but the budget does not take care of that in a way that makes me comfortable for that. So now, the upcoming elections, very, very important. And I believe that what we were able to do in the state of Ohio as Democrats in 2012 was our warm-up for 2014. And we have to have the same level of synergy, energy, and commitment to ensuring that we take back those constitutional offices and that we win seats in the Ohio Senate and the Ohio House. Because I want you to look at the mayhem. Thank you for that. Look at the mayhem and the damage that Republicans are doing in legislatures and governors' mansions. I mean, my God, I didn't even talk about how there's a provision in this budget to defund Planned Parenthood. 97% of what Planned Parenthood does is preventative. But to take that asset away from working men and women, and men use Planned Parenthood too, is wrong. Mammograms, Others scream. It is absolutely wrong, but they are doing it. And so we got folks there fighting to ask the governor to line item veto that. It is my hope that the Senate will take it out, because the only reason why that bill did not pass in the last year or something is because the Senate did not entertain it. And I got to give some credit to President Niehaus, because he could have very easily allowed that bill that passed the House to come over to the Senate and hit our floor, but he did not do that. The mood in the Senate now among the GOP, I'm not so sure that the GOP will have the same courage, and that came because we advocated for them not to be able to pass that. So we have women's lives at stake, and women should not have to ask for permission to be able to control their own bodies, no matter what they decide to do. It is their body. Also, you know that the Attorney General has weighed in on allowing private employers who have a religious aversion to contraception not to provide contraception to women. And so that would put women in a bad predicament. There's something wrong with that. How is it that erectile dysfunction drugs can be paid for with insurance, but women can't have their contraception paid for? It doesn't make any sense to me. It makes me angry. And that is why last year, ladies and gentlemen, you know I introduced my erectile dysfunction bill. And I wanted to prove a point here that if primarily male-dominated policymakers feel that it's appropriate to look out for women, I wanted to make sure we showed men a little love too, because we need to look out for them, because those drugs have serious, and I mean seriously, they have serious side effects. And so since men can't make their own decisions without government telling them what to do, I wanted to make sure that we looked out for them. You know, and this is real, and that bill got international attention because there's nothing like satire to push a point that it is wrong. And then they want to put women's lives in danger, the heartbeat bill, which I call the heartless bill, that even in instances of rape and incest, there is something wrong with that. It is dangerous what the GOP is doing to women. And I know that the men who love and respect women do not support these kinds of movements. So it is a shame. So if that is not enough, Democrats, we will not forget that in 2011, this was the same Republican Party that tried to take away collective bargaining rights in the state of Ohio, but we fought back. And the majority of the counties in the state, from the reddest part of the state to the bluest part of the state, stood up for working class men and women. In my opinion, it is not enough to just have a decent life. People who work hard should be afforded the opportunity to live a good life. There's nothing wrong with being able to take a vacation every now and then, to buy a car every now and then, to be able to afford to send your children to college. We have a group of folks that have turned the tables on what it means to be a public servant. I believe in the power of government to create avenues of opportunity for folks. I do. And that is why I ran for elected office. I believe that it is a ministry and that we should use our political power and clout to lift people and not put our feet on their necks. And that is exactly what the GOP is doing time and time again, whether it is Ohio or other states in this nation. That is exactly what they're doing. And if you don't believe me, look at their record. We will not forget that they tried to take away voting rights in this state. We will not forget that billboards cropped up all over the state of Ohio in the poorest communities trying to intimidate people. You know, they want to talk a lot about voter fraud, but voter intimidation is a crime as well. Folks should not be intimidated when they want to go and exercise their right to vote. Something is wrong because in this country, even though it has been a hard way coming, we have continuously advanced rights and opportunities. From when the vote was only relegated for white land-owning men, to the universal franchise for white men, to the 15th Amendment that opened up that right to black men, to the 19th Amendment that gave that right to women. We have advanced, but we have a crop of GOP who want to take us back. And I declare we will not go back. We will not forget. We will not forget. And so that is why putting the same synergy and energy towards the statewide offices is so vitally important. If we did it for President Obama and we did it for Senator Sherrod Brown, my God, we can do it for ourselves in 2014 in this state. That is why I am strongly considering my run for the Secretary of State, because we deserve real SOS in this state. And Mr. President, if I may, and then I'm going to close, and I suppose you're going to open up for questions. I just want to share with this group that, you do see before you a relatively young lady with a fancy title, but I have not always had a fancy title. And how I got over, my soul looks back all the time and wonders how I got over. I am the oldest of 7 children. I am a first-generation college graduate, which I'm very proud of that. And my mother died at the age of 42 years old. And she died with her dreams deferred. You know that poem written by Langston Hughes, What Happened to a Dream Deferred? And my parents got married as teenagers, and it just did not work. It was just one of those things. So when I hear politicians talking about wanting to take away safety net from folks, I am a safety net child. And but for a safety net, I don't know where my siblings or I would be today. My mother was not perfect, and she is a personification of many poor people in this nation who try, but sometimes they fall short. And although my mother never lived to see me walk across the stage of Cuyahoga Community College or graduate from Cleveland State,
all right.
That's okay. All right. Okay. We love you. We love you. You're okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sometimes I can tell the story.
Okay.
But
He's watching over.
We love you.
I just want you to get to know me as a person. And I am a fierce advocate for everything that I believe in. And I just don't believe it's right to have people elected to office who hate government and people elected to office who hate people, especially poor and middle class. And so the reason why I fight so hard is because of my mother's memory, and I know that when I go into that state house, who I am standing up for.
All right, man.
And so when people try to steal stuff from folks who try every day and have a right to live their measure of the American dream, it makes me angry. So although my mother never lived to see all of the great accomplishments, I know that she is in heaven saying, "You go, girl, you have done me proud." And for me to have become a cycle breaker, and that's all most people want. They just want to live a good life. And for us to see our son walk across a stage of Cleveland State becoming a second-generation college graduate, that means more to me because I know that we have broken the cycle of poverty and undereducation in our family line. And I want for other people's children what I want for my son, and I want for other working class and middle class people and poor people in this state and this nation what I would want for my family. And so that is why I fight so hard. That is why in 2012 I did not resist on national TV to call it just what it was in this state. I didn't miss any words. That is why when I am on that Senate floor, I don't miss words. It is wrong to introduce bills that you want to drug test welfare recipients, yet you got CEOs of companies that get corporate welfare. And you don't want to balance the playing field. Republicans try to divide us. Whether you are poor or middle class or wealthy, all of us are necessary because it takes teamwork to make the American dream work. That is what I fight for every single day, and I will not stop. And so whether it's workers' rights, voting rights, or women's rights, I want you to know what you have in me as an elected official. And so I plan to continue to use every breath that I have to continue to fight for the people of this great state and the people of this nation. So So I'm gonna close right there. Thank you so much.
Go, girl.